What's up, everybody? Happy Saturday. Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. My name is Andy Herman. We have our first day of Packers rookie minicamps 2021 in the books. I did not get to attend Friday's session, so I'm not going to dive too far into rookie minicamps today. However, I am incredibly excited to let you know that I will be there today on Saturday. So I will be reporting back tomorrow on this episode or here on the Pack a Day podcast, everything that I saw, any major takeaways, and everything like that. So really excited to be at minicamp day 2 in just a little bit. And again, very excited to share my findings with you tomorrow. Probably not going to be like any insane takeaways on a, non-padded rookie minicamp practice, but still super fun to be there. And again, I'll report back with anything that I do see, anything that stands out. So make sure to check out tomorrow's episode. But there was one noteworthy quote, of course, from the post-practice press conference from Matt Lafleur. And that, of course, was his quote saying, nothing mostly new with Aaron Rodgers, but that they want Aaron Rodgers back in the worst way. Now, I mentioned afterwards in a tweet that it doesn't sound great, right? So all leading up until this point was that there's been a rift between Rodgers and the Packers. And the Packers, of course, confirmed that with Mark Murphy and then, Brian Gutekunst, Matt Lafleur all during the draft. Nobody's denying it. There's definitely a rift there. It's, presumably something they've been working on. For Matt Lafleur to say, we desperately want him, or we not desperately, but we want him back in the worst way. It screams to me that things maybe still aren't in the best place. Now, I was immediately accused of being, speculative or just saying that I'm speculating on this information. Of course, I am speculating on this information. Everyone is speculating on this information. We don't know what Aaron Rodgers is thinking. We have not heard from him. I have certainly not talked to him. Aaron, if you're listening, I would love to talk to you and pick your brain on this topic, but I don't see that happening. So, of course, I am speculating, but I don't know. And please feel free to share with me how you could take it any other way than Matt Lafleur saying, we want Aaron Rodgers back in the worst way, that there's still work to be done here. There's still a disconnect. And maybe it's closer. Maybe it's better. Maybe there's a lot of different things that, are unknown at that point. It's still, to me, take it for what it's worth. Take it for what you will. It still, for me, sounds like it's not great at the moment. And to make a public plea, basically, saying we want Aaron Rodgers back in the worst way and he knows that still, to me, screams of things are not in a great spot. Who knows? I could be wrong. I would love to be wrong. I would love that this would be just a happy marriage and, everyone can work everything out and Aaron Rodgers can retire a Packer right off into the sunset after a couple Super Bowl wins. I personally am all for that resolution. Just to me, speculating completely here, it doesn't seem great. But enough about the saga that is Aaron Rodgers. Let's have a little bit of fun today. Asked on Twitter for some questions that people would like me to answer. Haven't done a mailbag or, question and answer in a really long time. I think I've only done one in the 200 plus episodes that I've done. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think I've only done one and it's certainly been a while. So let's do a fun Q&A and I'm just going to read some of the questions and react to them and answer them as best as I can. So first of all, Kevin Mooney asks, was adding Slayton enough to bolster the defensive line? And I think this is a really interesting question. My biggest answer is no. And I've said this for years now. If Kenny Clark goes down for any period of time, I shudder to think what that defensive line looks like. And maybe more importantly, there is literally one player on the defensive line that I trust, and that's Kenny Clark. That's literally it. Dean Lowry, Tyler Lancaster, Kingsley Keke, maybe Tadarius Slayton, maybe some of those guys can be solid rotational players and help you out. And to be fair, I think towards the end of last year, everyone's like, the defensive line was a complete disaster. For the most part, second half of the season, that defensive line played pretty well collectively. They were much more assignment sure. They played within their gaps. And surprise, surprise, the defense, especially the run defense, looked a little bit better. Was it great? No. But this was also a defense with Mike Pettin that wasn't necessarily focusing on run defense, to say the least. Smaller players, sub packages, they weren't hammering home run defense. That wasn't their goal. Their goal was to stop explosive plays and stop opposing pass offenses. We'll see what that looks like under Joe Barry. But in that LA Rams defense a season ago, they played really light boxes, their safeties way back. And if that's going to be the case, it puts even more pressure on your defensive line. And it puts an insane amount of pressure, again, should anything happen to Kenny Clark. So was Slayton enough to bolster that line? In my opinion, no. Can they still get by and win football games? And if everything else is great, win a Super Bowl with that defensive line? I think they can. But I think ideally in a perfect world, they would have added another veteran, a solid veteran to that group. And I think even just adding a really nice number 2 piece to Kenny Clark would, level everything out. Maybe Lowry and Kiki can split times as the 3, then Tyler, Lancaster is your 5 basically, with, Slayton being your 6th defensive lineman. Like that feels a little bit better. But to me, no, at this point, they haven't done enough, but I still think they can get by. Converse Craig asks, if Rodgers returns this season, do you think the hard feelings will be beyond repair to the point that the on-field chemistry will be gone? I think the answer to that is no for now. I do think as time goes on, it gets more challenging. And if you go through training camp and start playing preseason games and there's still no Aaron Rodgers, and all of a sudden, like the day before the season starts, he shows up and says, hey guys, I'm back. I'm sure there's still going to be plenty in that locker room that are happy to see him, but it's not ideal. And if there's no deal or nothing that changes with this contract, I still think you have to ask, is he there for the right reasons? And again, this is all speculative, but, is he happy? Does he want to be there? If all those answers are yes, and he's excited and he comes in and, ideally before training camp, I think you can mend any potential, fences that need to be mended pretty quickly. And I think personally, the main disconnect would be between Rodgers and Gutekunst, or Rodgers and maybe, just the front office in general, Mark Murphy. I think ultimately those two groups don't spend a ton of time together throughout the course of the season, right? 2 totally different operations within the organization. And that's partly why Aaron Rodgers is probably upset with things. He wants to maybe have a little bit more say in that. But I ultimately think that can be mended relatively quickly. My one concern there, again, if all reports are true, which again, we don't fully know at this point, and he's not happy and he's, making demands and he wants more involvement, more everything, and you give in and you give him everything that he wants and more, if he all of a sudden goes and says, I want to call the plays on Sundays, I want to have full authority and autonomy over the offense. You've just given him everything else. How do you say no? Like, at some point you have to have some level of pushback to say, no, we're not going to do that. And it starts to get very complex and complicated, and certainly above my pay grade to try to figure out all the nuances of that. But I do think that they can still mend the fences that if even they need to be mended. And I think the sooner it happens, the more easy that is to have happen. Alex Roundtree asks, who is starting week 1? Aaron Jones. I'm going to say, Adrian Amos, Darnell Savage, Za'Darius Smith. There's a lot of guys. I'm assuming, Alex, that you're meaning who starts at quarterback week 1. If I was a betting man today and I had to place a significant amount of money and I was forced to, I would probably still put money on Aaron Rodgers. I think that still is the most likely scenario at this point. He's under contract. The Packers have dug their heels in and said we're not trading him. It seems to be the feel around the league that there's not going to be a trade involving Aaron Rodgers. And at some point, I think that this ultimately gets ironed out. We'll see. There's as I've mentioned a couple weeks ago, there are going to be a million ebbs and flows to this. The waves will come, and some days they're going to smash you in the face, and other days it's going to be smooth sailing. It's going to feel like, all right, he's going to be a Packer, and then he's for sure gone, and then he's going to retire. He's going to be a Packer, gone, retire. Like, it's going to go back and forth, and there's going to be different reports that come out on different days that make you feel different ways. If I were betting today, I still think he's back. My level of confidence in saying that is probably under 25%. But if I were betting, that's where I would hedge my bets today. Both Reed Wilson and Dom Daphne Burner asked, surprisingly enough, about Dominique Daphne. The general question for both was, can he be a contributor this upcoming season, or what do I see in Dominique Daphne? Really liked what he put on tape and what he put on the field at the end of last season. I think what I'll say at this point about Dominique Daphne is, to me, he is a 53-man rosterable player, which doesn't necessarily always equate to making the team at the end of the year. It doesn't necessarily mean that he makes a big impact. And there's definitely a ton of competition at that tight end H-back position, right? You've got Tunyon, Sternberger, you've got Mercedes Lewis, Josiah DeGuara, Dominique Daphne, a variety of different names in that group that, are all vying for potential playing time. So I like him. I think he, if you're just putting a roster together and you said, Dominique Daphne's on the 53, I think that makes sense. I think he's a good player. How high is his ceiling and how much better can he get, I think is still a question, but I'm very intrigued by him. Very much liked what I saw on tape. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how many of those 5 players I just mentioned they keep and how they really utilize them in the offense this upcoming season. Mercedes Lewis, Robert Tonyan, probably the easiest ones to kind of pencil in, right? Lewis is going to be your blocker. Tunyan's going to be your overall guy. DeGuara and Daphne will probably compete for that H-back role with a significant hedge going towards Josiah DeGuara there. And then can Jay Sternberger carve out a role, I think is going to be the big question there. But like Dominique Daphne, we'll definitely have to fight for his roster spot, but I think he's a 53-man roster player. Micah Minor asks, do you think they will make Stokes the slot and have him battle for cornerback 2? Or have a battle for cornerback 2? I think ultimately this is going to work very much like the offensive line where Matt Lafleur always says we want our best 5 on the field. I think they want their best corners on the field. And I think if that's ultimately Kevin King, Eric Stokes, Jair Alexander, they will work it out. Whether Jair's in the slot, whether Stokes is in the slot, I don't think you'll see Kevin King in the slot at least too much. But I think they're going to get their best 3 on the field. If it's Stokes and Sullivan and Jair, then I think you'll see Stokes and Jair on the outside with Sullivan in the slot. If it's Jair and Sullivan and King and Jair on the outside with Sullivan in the slot. So I think they're going to get their best guys on the field, and however that works, that works. I do think Stokes has some ability to play in the slot. I think he's better on the outside, but you start by figuring out what you want to do with Jair Alexander on any given Sunday. You're not figuring out, you're not reverse engineering that. Wherever you need Jair Alexander to be, you start there. And then the question becomes, all right, if he's at left corner or if he's traveling with somebody, who's on corner, who's on wide receiver 2 or who's on the right side, you figure everything out after that. So we'll see what happens, but I definitely think Stokes will be in that conversation one way or the other. Chad Van Ogerberg, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, asks, will there be playing time for Kylan Hill? I think, first of all, Kylan Hill has to win that number 3 running back position. I think that's going to be a very interesting, battle. Dexter Williams, Mike Weber, Patrick Taylor, of course, and then Kylan Hill. I like Kylan Hill's chances of winning that number 3 running back spot. And then I think you ultimately look at, kind of in a similar vein to A.J. Dillon a season ago. In, I think at a lesser capacity, but I think Matt LaFleur's been pretty clear that he likes having 3 good running backs on his roster and wants to utilize them in some capacity. So, I don't think it's going to be a big role. Maybe you could use him as a kick returner if you needed to. Maybe you could have some special teams value. And I do think that, if one of those top running backs goes down, you're going to need somebody to step up. And maybe that's a Kylan Hill as well. But I think he has a really good chance to be that number 3 running back. Maybe see about 100 to 150 snaps some point this season if Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon stay healthy, that is. D. Bess asks, will there be a Matt LaFleur extension or how soon could one happen? My simple answer to that is not soon enough. Could not in any way, shape, or form be more impressed with Matt LaFleur up to this point. With everything. With literally everything. A couple of calls maybe in the NFC Championship game that I think he maybe could have gone a different way. Yes. Those are all parts of learning in your first couple of seasons as an offensive coordinator. How he handled the transition from McCarthy to him, how he got Aaron Rodgers on the same page with him in his first 2 seasons as head coach, how he's handled the media, how he's handled the players, how the players like playing for him, the game day situation, down and distance calls and decisions. 99.9% of it has been fantastic. I think Green Bay just hit it absolutely out of the park with hiring Matt LaFleur. I think he can already be in the conversation for a top 5 coach in the NFL. I'm incredibly excited to see where his career goes. And I do believe that the hiring of Matt LaFleur in and of itself will help Green Bay win a Super Bowl at some point. Who else is on the team at that point? We will remain to be seen, but I think he's that good of a coach that he's going to help them get to that point. Ian Ewing asks, do you think this team is a playoff team with Jordan Love at quarterback in 2021? My answer is simply no, and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Jordan Love. I think if they make the transition and Aaron Rodgers is gone via retirement or trade or other, whatever the case may be, I think the season is going to be so complicated. There's going to be so much drama, so much change, so much everything, similar to that Favre off season where the organization as a whole, the players, the coaches, the front office, everyone's just exhausted that entire season. And now you're talking about playing, an 18-week, 17-game schedule. I just think it's, and now with basically a redshirt freshman at quarterback, meaning that last year was his redshirt year. This is his first year. And Jordan Love, who the last time I saw him, and anyone that was able to attend practices saw him, was really in training camp last year and significantly behind Tim Boyle as the number 3 quarterback. To say that everything got ironed out and Jordan Love became the quarterback and then everything just worked out, I think there's a very slim chance that happens. Now, I trust Matt Lafleur. I really like the rest of this team and the talent on this team. And could they make a run at a playoff spot, especially with additional playoff spots now? Absolutely. But it's not necessarily something that I would expect. Sean asks, if I was GM, who would I have drafted and why? And I'm assuming first round here. The name that sticks out to me would be Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I just think he would have added such a unique playmaking element to that defense. Now, he did have some concerns about a heart issue, which is why he fell into the second round. So if the doctor said, hey, you just can't draft this guy, there's too much risk, in that case, I would have went with I would have tried to trade down, and then I would have went with Asante Samuel at some point in the early second round is probably what I would have done there. But, Eric Stokes has all the talent in the world. Stokes could easily end up being better than Asante Samuel. Obviously, the league thought he was. He went about 15, 20 spots ahead of Samuel, but I really like Samuel, and I think he's going to make a really good pro. And again, Owusu-Koramoah would have been a really fun player in this defense. Then last but not least, Matt Pickett asks, outside of any current NFL players, who would I most like to have a guest on Pack-A-Day? I think Pat McAfee would be a hell of a lot of fun. Like who wouldn't want to have a conversation with him? Brian Gutekunst would be amazing. Matt LaFleur would be amazing. Former players, Charles Woodson would be fantastic. Like those would be some, insane level people to have on the podcast and get to chat to. But I've already had the opportunity to talk to just so many amazing people, on the audio podcast and even a couple here on the video podcast. Hoping to have a couple more soon. And it's just been such an amazing ride. So wouldn't necessarily change anything, but those would be some names that would definitely be on that list if given the choice. It's going to do it for me today. Thanks as always for listening. Excited to report back from minicamp tomorrow, so make sure to check that out. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.